Hello, all, and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week, I'm joined by some of my favorite husky, hairy, huggable homos to dish up some film news now and again, or on super crazy busy movie times like we're in now, review not one, but two films. That's right. Episode 298 of the Movie Bears podcast is a review of both A Star is Born, starring Lady Gaga and Bradley Cooper, as well as Venom, starring Tom Hardy. So two big movies to discuss. Hopefully you've had some time to see them. If not, fear not. We'll give you a fair warning before we open things up to spoilers. But before we can do any of that stuff, I want to introduce those wonderful guys I mentioned just moments ago. Jim Pugliafico is here with us. Welcome back, Jim.
I am here. Thanks. Good to be back on the show. Not good to be back at work after a vacation, but it's like 2 days back and I'm ready for another vacation. But I'm looking forward to the show tonight. So welcome to the podcast, everyone.
I could use another vacation again myself. Good thing Palm Springs Pride is coming up in a couple weeks, babe. Just around the corner.
Yeah, that'll be another long weekend getaway. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Indeed. And Will Lindis is here as well. Welcome back, Will.
Hey, glad we're back. I'm thinking we're back. It's great. Like this is this really busy time of the year for all of us. We've got between vacations. I know you guys just went on a very beautiful and touching trip, and from what I followed along on social media, I've spent the last couple of weeks between work trips and music festivals, and we've got stuff coming up too. You mentioned Palm Springs Pride. I've got BlizzCon coming up at the end of the month. We're definitely in the mix of it right now, but I'm glad we have tonight to talk movies.
We got tonight. Mm-hmm. I'm glad too, especially because we tried to do this the other night when the great YouTube apocalypse of 2018 hit. Right as we went to hit that broadcast button, YouTube went down. Wah, wah, wah.
We were sitting here, just listeners, we're all sitting here, mics and computers and lighting and all of this stuff ready to go, and we got to the spot literally right before you go live when YouTube just completely took a crap. And it wasn't just us, it was all of YouTube, and it was down for several hours. I was reading some different conspiracy theories about why it went down. Some of them are pretty far-fetched, but either way, it was really disappointing. But again, I'm glad we're able to get tonight to sort of do round two of this discussion, which I think is going to be a good one.
I agree. Absolutely. I want to give a quick shout out real quick to some folks who've joined us in the live chat. We got a bunch of people hanging out. Just a few so far have said hi. Jordan Riley, hello. Glad to see you. Mark Evan as well. Welcome. Don't forget, as we're sharing our thoughts on A Star is Born and Venom, to drop your thoughts in the live chat. We'd love to maybe give your thoughts some air on air, so to speak. Mm-hmm. But guys, it's time. Are we ready to dive into Venom? And then we'll save A Star is Born for a little bit later.
Yeah, let's do it in exactly that order. I think it's going to make for a good peak for this episode.
Wow. We'll get the Venom out first, and then the healing can begin.
Who knows?
We'll suck the Venom out.
Yeah. Wait. What are we doing?
I mean, I would suck the
Venom out.
I would suck the Venom out of Tom Hardy if we were hiking and he got bit by a snake.
Brad.
Or an alien.
That's not Venom.
Oh, whoops.
Yeah, Brad, you've been doing it wrong.
I saw these ropes of white. Anyway, okay, so we're gonna go ahead. We're gonna go ahead. We're recording later than we normally do. This is almost my bedtime, and I get punchy before bedtime, so you'll have to be patient with me this week, listeners. But guys, here we go. We're going to go ahead and kick things off with Venom. Just a quick note. If you haven't seen Venom yet, if you're kind of on the fence about it, if you're looking for an opinion as to whether we think you should see it or not, we'll give you some thoughts on that. Totally spoiler free, so we don't, ruin the experience for you. I'm holding back laughter. And then we will go ahead and give you fair warning before we open things up to spoilers and talk about some of the bigger plot points. I don't know that we'll have tons and tons of spoiler talk, but we'll see how things go. Here we go. Our discussion of Venom. Venom. Hey, Will. I love the face that you're making. Let me just center the camera on you for a second and screenshot that face. That's awesome. Will, do us a favor. Go ahead and kick this discussion off, if you don't mind. Just give us a little bit of brief setup for this film. And do you think this is worth checking out in theaters? If it's still in theaters, maybe waiting for rental or skipping entirely?
Yeah, absolutely. So Venom is a bit of a curiosity in terms of its origin, like where it comes from, because Venom is historically a villain / anti-hero set in the Spider-Man universe, but ever since Disney purchased Spider-Man away from Sony, they've been split into two different directions. So Venom is, in this movie, a complete standalone character without his Spider-Man roots. It follows a Tom Hardy playing Eddie Brock, who is an intrepid reporter who is known for being a little scrappy and for sticking his nose probably where it doesn't belong. That lands him in some trouble, and as part of that trouble, he ends up coming into contact with a symbiote, which is this alien, parasitic, symbiotic thing that latches onto a host, and in some cases gives them superpowers. In this particular case, it creates the alter ego of Venom. Oh boy. So I think there's going to be some discussion that comes out of this movie about it being in consideration for like the worst film of the year. And I'll start off with the positive and say, I don't think this movie is the worst movie of the year, nor is it like in that discussion for me. But that's probably the extent of the praise I'm willing to give it. That yes, there were maybe a few worse movies. This movie has tonal and personality issues just all over the place. I don't think it quite understands its characters, and by that I mean specifically Brock and Venom, that kind of like the duality that they share. I don't think it understands whether the movie wants to be grimdark or whether it wants to be slapsticky and funny. I don't think it understands how to utilize its female lead in Michelle Williams in this. She comes across as particularly egregious in some places. I don't know. This movie just has a lot of really, really rough issues. A lot of it is the narrative pacing and the editing as well. It feels like there is one incredibly long Act 1 with no Act 2 going straight into an Act 3 climax in terms of the structure. A lot of setup, a little bit of payoff, but no real meat on the bones. And that's a problem, because I think that there could be a good movie in here somewhere. The points when I was most engaged was when, like, the director, I guess, was looking the other way and Tom Hardy just decided to fucking go for it and act batshit crazy. There's moments where, like, that type of stuff kind of interested me, but it wasn't grounded in a world that supported that style of acting. We also, when we get to the spoiler section, we'll have to talk about the stinger, which is probably the most goddamn ridiculous thing I've probably seen in the movies all year. So yeah, this is a hard pass for me. This was not a very good movie. For fans of the property or for people that just like good movies, there's a lot of issues here. At least it wasn't boring. At least it wasn't boring. That's my praise for it. It was bad, but at least like it was an entertaining train wreck.
I want to see that on the movie poster. That quote right there, Will.
I would gladly, at least
boring.
I didn't nod off, even though I wanted to.
It wasn't
boring. Bears podcast.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hard pass from Will. Jim, how about for you?
Yeah. I don't bring any particular fandom or affinity for the Venom character or this story, or even really much of the Spider-Man stuff that they didn't bring into this movie. So that didn't bother me so much. The origins and a lot of people, I think, were crapping all over this movie even before seeing it, just because they knew it wasn't going to have the same origin or have the same roots with Spider-Man and what happens. I watched was it the animated series?
Yes, from the 90s.
Animated movie or animated series. Where Venom was introduced and how that character came to be. And I know this movie wasn't that, but I wasn't that's not a nostalgia point for me either. Where do we start with this one? Just a very weird movie for me. Like, this was a different kind of superhero, anti-hero comic book movie for me. It felt like it was trying to be, I got vibes from this movie that were more like that it was trying to be like a second-rate Deadpool almost, especially when they tried to get really slapsticky and quip, ultra quippy, and you got the Venom character getting most of the quip lines, and Tom Hardy kind of playing the straight man a little bit for a long time. And then we get the Michelle Williams problem. Any movie that uses an actress with the caliber of Michelle Williams in this kind of role right off the bat has my gets me upset. And this movie did that, because every time I saw her, I'm like, what is she doing in this movie? What is Tom Hardy doing in this movie? Almost anybody could have played this role. And I'm not saying that Tom Hardy wasn't good, because Tom Hardy's a great actor, and I think he gives his all to try and save this movie. It just wasn't enough. I would say this is a hard pass for me. I would not recommend this movie to anybody. Although, like you, Will, I was kind of entertained in parts, not kind of just kind of how goofy it was. Like the relationship between Venom and Eddie Brock. I thought if you look at the movie as kind of a relationship movie between those two, it's kind of silly and fun if you look at it that way. But that's the only angle, the only enjoyment I could get out of it. So, yeah, hard pass. It might be a curiosity when it comes on VOD if you haven't seen it yet, and you have kind of a, hey, I want to see how bad this is, or see what it's all about. You might want to give it a go on VOD, but I wouldn't pay money for it. So hard pass.
Woof. 2 hard passes. It's not looking good for Venom on the Movie Bears podcast.
Not so far.
I guess it's up to me to come in and be, nope, just kidding. I hated it. This is a awful movie for me. Really one of the most terrible movies of the year for me. So let me just emphasize the for me part, because we all have different sensibilities. We all have different things we look for in movies. Was having a great conversation with a friend of ours, Brian, while we were in Hawaii over the weekend. And he was talking about how, like, sometimes, he listens to our show and sometimes, like, we really don't like something. And he's like, I was entertained. I really liked the movie. It was fun. He's like, maybe that makes me too simple. I'm like, no, that doesn't make you simple at all. It just means you have different tastes, and that's okay. So if you hearing me say I hate Venom makes me look like a jerk because you loved it, I'm sorry. But for me, it just wasn't great for reasons that Will and Jim already mentioned. I tried to get past the whole, like, Spider-Man-less origin story. I mean, it shows you in the trailer that, like, Eddie encounters the symbiote for the first time. I actually think this movie would have been 1,000,000 times better if it wasn't an origin story. If it just started that he was already Venom living in San Francisco, and they, like, built up this plot and thing, and maybe they just kind of alluded around the origin. I don't know. But I think it would have been more interesting to me, because I found the lack of Spider-Man's involvement a little bit distracting. But I tried to set that aside. I was like, movie, you know what? Go ahead. Here's the ball. Knock it out of the park for me if you can. And I just don't know what this movie is supposed to accomplish. Like, there's parts of it where, Jim, you mentioned Deadpool. I would say its PG-13 rating held it back from that level of
Yeah, and I want
craziness.
to talk about that later too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic to unpack, because like going in that direction, it's like, oh, okay, well, take us there then. I'm fine with that. Let's do it. But oh no, wait, PG-13, we can't. When it tried to be like a very gritty, dark anti-hero thing, I like Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy's great, but Tom Hardy came off a little bit goofy for me, even in some of the dark, gritty stuff. Like in the trailer, they show, Venom like talking to this guy in a bodega store or whatever. And he's like, I'm going to rip your arms and your legs off. And you'll be like a turd in the wind. And then he turns back into Eddie Brock and he's like, sorry, Mrs. Whatever, I got a symbiote. And I'm like, that's supposed to be a fucking parasite, whatever. Thanks for correcting me. That's supposed to be like this fucking like scary ass moment, and they turn it into a little quip thing. So it didn't work for me, unfortunately. Michelle Williams, who I adore, I mean, it was good to see her here, but completely wasted. If I had to choose one positive thing to say, I guess it would be that the symbiote itself looked kind of cool when it wasn't on Eddie Brock as Venom, when it was just kind of writhing around and doing its symbiote thing. Looked great. The Venom suit itself, because there is no Spider-Man, it of course can't have the classic white spider logo. So the weird like lightning vein things all over it that were white, just, I don't know, visually it looked messy more than anything else. So anyway, hard pass for me. That is a 3 hard pass, triple hat trick. On Venom.
I wanted to talk.
Oh, go ahead, Jim.
I want to talk about the rating thing. So we have a movie where this anti-hero villain creature thing that's very, I mean, it's designed to be very intimidating and scary looking, something out of a horror movie almost. Walks around, and to bad guys or people we're supposed to think are bad guys, he talks about eating their body parts, tearing them apart, ripping their heads off and eating them and stuff. And then none of that really happens. Like it's either that or it happens off screen.
It happens off screen a few times, but
and I don't want to get into, we'll get into an example in spoilers that I thought was very egregious toward the end of the movie. But I think the movie was stuck again, and we've seen other movies do this, stuck in that land of in between where they want to be something edgy and kind of knock the audience back a little bit, but they're held back by this rating. And there's kind of a line they can't cross. And this movie goes, I think wants to be on the other side of that line, but they're not. And it's very obvious, and it's a problem throughout the movie. And I think it maybe held this movie back from being something. I said the movie was kind of goofy. I think it held the movie back from being something totally bonkers, over the top goofy, which might have been in this movie's favor.
Yeah. So this is a character that, I mean, I guess he technically appeared in the late 80s first, but this is a character who very much personifies the 90s in a lot of way. And I think part of that is sort of like the dark and the edgy stuff. And I think the rating really keeps you from exploring some of those things, especially because this character, as he was created in the comics, which I don't hold any need for him to be like this, but as he's created in the comics, he's supposed to be sort of like a dark mirror of Spider-Man, and it isn't until the two have had enough time bouncing off of one another that he sort of starts to develop some things that are outside of that dark mirror relationship with this other character. By doing this origin story the way they did, and Brad, I want to circle back to something you said before, by having a prolonged origin story, it showcased even more just how weak a character who is designed as a dark mirror is when you don't have that character that other character to reflect off of. If they had just fully formed him either at the like a very short origin at the beginning, or if he had already been formed and we could have just seen him as a complete thing, I think it would have been easier to get past those things. But as it was, we were seeing a reflection of the thing that wasn't there, and that made this reflection seem incredibly hollow. This whole movie felt like, when I think about what it most feels like,
I might say shallow.
It might be shallow, except for I'm not going to listen to this movie over and over and over on my Apple iTunes. But in terms of like, if someone's thinking like, what movie is this most like? What can I compare this to? I'm going to give you another movie from the 90s based on a 90s comic book character. And I think that the comparison is very, very apt. This feels a lot like the 1997 Spawn movie.
It does. Yep.
Like which that one at least had had the good grace to be a rated R movie. But this, like, in terms of how the CGI looks, how the character works, how like the story tried to be dark but also not too dark, and it sort of hurt it in some places. This is a lot like that for me, failure of a Spawn movie in the late 90s. In fact, if someone were to told me when I walked into the theater that, hey, we just uncovered this movie from the late 90s that no one had seen yet, do you want to see this like 20-year bootleg, and showed me Venom, I would have been like, oh yeah, okay, I guess that is a young Tom Hardy.
Yeah. All right. Not great.
Not a lot. Let me see. I'm trying to think if there's anything else to really talk about here before we go into spoilers. What do you guys think?
I think I'm ready for spoilers. Well,
yeah, the quicker we spoil it, the quicker we can get off it.
All right. Spoilers. I mean, that sounds super boring, but spoiler it up. Making fun of a Diet Coke commercial we see at the movies all the time. All right, so
two hot dogs.
Spoilers are officially fair game for Venom. If you are listening live right now and you don't want to be spoiled on Venom, come back in 13 minutes and 8 seconds and we'll begin our A Star is Born discussion. If you've seen the movie or you don't care about spoilers, please go ahead and keep listening. If you're listening on digital tape delay, of course, you can skip around using the time index in the show notes. That way you can, skip spoilers if you want and start with A Star is Born. That may help you out. But here we go. Spoilers for Venom. And to kick that off, Bill Harris. Hey, Bill. Glad to see you. Welcome. Bill says, hello, y'all. Not great, but not terrible either. The studio butchered it. Hardly talked about 40 minutes being cut from the middle. No wonder it doesn't make sense. Will, you're nodding your head a lot. Were you already thinking along those lines?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, that was sort of what I was saying before about how this movie has like 2/3 of it is a prolonged act 1 and then it jumps straight into an act 3. This film was missing a lot of its meat. It was missing a lot of that act 2 stuff. Tom Hardy went on record and said like, well, the cut that I was expecting was going to be a lot better because they cut like 40 minutes of the good stuff. And when your lead actor is sort of bagging on your film during its release, there's an issue. The problem is that this movie made money. Like, people saw this movie enough that I think Sony is not going to walk away from this and going like, oh, people didn't like this. I think Sony is going to walk away from this thinking like, well, shit, we were able to cut a bunch out of it, get that PG-13 rating, which got more butts in those seats than if it was a hard R. When we make the inevitable sequel with Ronald McDonald as the villain, which we'll get to, we should do that same tactic. So I'm very, very disheartened by the financial reaction and what will inevitably be another shitty one of these movies coming out in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, I want to get back to Bill's comment. He said that that Tom Hardy said a lot was cut out of the middle, and maybe that's why it doesn't make sense. I don't think my problem with this movie was that it didn't make sense to me. I just don't think it hung together as anything cohesive. Like I said to Bill, like, was there something that like obviously didn't connect and didn't make sense, or like did it feel like there were parts of the movie missing? Maybe. I mean, we could talk about that a little bit, but for me, it didn't. It felt like just a movie that there wasn't really any substance there to make sense of. I mean, it was pretty simple story, just not executed in a very exciting way.
I wouldn't say that it felt like parts were missing for me. It just felt unbalanced. Like I felt like we spent 2/3 of the movie like working up to him becoming Venom, and then we just had a very quick like him as Venom resolution.
Yep.
So like,
and that's that
two.
Act 2 stuff that I really wanted. Was like so the way this film basically plays out. A lot of Tom Hardy being a, as the movie calls him, a loser and dealing with all of the stuff, like the fallout from his actions. Then he's investigating this thing, suddenly has a symbiote, and fairly quickly, the two of them are bantering off of each other and moving on to the final conflict. What we didn't have was room for those two characters, and by that, I mean Eddie Brock and Venom, to really breathe and to discuss things with one another, and for them to build some rapport, so that some of those final moments, this movie has a lot of very cliched, like one character sacrificing themselves for the other, back and forth ad nauseum, and that only makes sense when you feel that it's in the characters' motivations to make those sacrifices. And I didn't feel like they were, because I didn't feel like these characters had enough time with one another to want to sacrifice themselves for each other, if that makes sense. And that's all Act 2 stuff. That's all that stuff that I don't know for sure if that was the coverage that was cut out of the film. But who knows? But
I don't know if it would have helped it for me. I mean, I really don't. Like, I don't know. They're just, I get it. I get the whole premise. This dark thing has taken over this guy's body and makes him do bad things and turns him into an anti-hero. I get that. I get enough of that, I think. I mean, maybe I could have done with more of that and less of the plot. Did we even need that plot of the, Venom taking down the real villain in the story? I don't know.
That's why I say, like, you almost could have like started this movie with Venom as well, a fully realized Venom, because I think that could have strengthened this whole like, oh no, other symbiotes have now appeared. Why the fuck is Venom in San Francisco and not New York with Spider-Man? Because he heard there's more symbiotes in San Francisco. And you know what I mean? Like, I think you could have made for a much more compelling story that way. Also, if you're going to tell the story of Carnage, why have your first movie be predicated on other symbiotes out there just for your sequel to be the king of the symbiotes?
Yeah, I think that a lot of that comes as sort of like the Dark Knight trilogy's formula was do a lighter villain for the origin story so that your king villain, the Joker, can be in the second one. I think that formula is getting repeated across a lot of these films, which is a shame, because I think films need to be written to stand alone as well. JP hits very, very heartily here in the comments on my biggest problem, which was not with Brock, but with Venom's motivations. He says, Venom's entire motivation changed for no reason. Suddenly he wants to save humanity after 50 minutes of wanting to kill us off. And that's absolutely the type of thing that we needed more development to get. Venom's just like, I'm going to eat pancreases. I hate people. Fuck them all. Blah, 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 blah. And then he says in the next scene, he's like, you know what? I like this kind of planet and I'm going to save it. And it feels like the motivation is paper thin and not developed. Like they give the reason why. He says, well, I'm a loser on my own planet and you're losers. Let's be losers together, essentially. But it didn't come out of anything organic. It was a plot point on paper that the character said, as opposed to something that we got to see organically on screen.
Yeah, I didn't see it so much as a plot point, but as like the two characters kind of melding with each other. I think that some of Eddie's traits were absorbed by the symbiote, right? And became, a little more, or a little less, one-dimensional, right? He became more. The more time he spent with Eddie or on Eddie or whatever, the more, human-like traits or thinking that he developed. And to me, it was kind of like a tempering of that character, which I thought was pretty good.
So I love that you bring that up, because one of my favorite things about the Venom story in the comics, in the TV shows, like to some degree, yes, the host of Venom influences the symbiote, right? I'm reading a comic series right now from the early 2000s where Venom first comes to be. And, like Harry Osborn is, it wasn't Eddie Brock. It was Harry Osborn, I guess, at that time. He's telling Venom, like, no, like, we don't kill. We don't do that. Like, you can't just do that. And, like, we got a little teensy bit of that in the movie. I think if we had had more time to, like, let that breathe and maybe have a little bit more of that, maybe I could see that sudden turnabout at the end. But, like, to go from, oh, no, we don't kill, to we got to save the world, it's too much for me.
Especially the entirety of from the time Brock gets the symbiote to the time that he loses it in the hospital and then it gets on Michelle Williams because this movie is dumb. That amount of time was like what, like a day, like a night? Like it wasn't a lot of, it was not a very long period of time. So, I mean, I would buy the whole, like, the symbiote is learning from Brock as well, if we had had more time to see it learning from him. As it was, I think they included some lines in the script so that they could sort of like lampshade that. Like they, Brock did say don't kill people, so we checked that box. But I think just because the characters say it doesn't mean that the motivations feel real. And that's the biggest problem with this versus, when you look at a movie like, okay, like you mentioned Deadpool. You mentioned, and I'll think back to like Deadpool 2, which came out earlier this year. That's a character with some really fucking bonkers motivations that kind of go all over the place. But the film, to its credit at least, takes a lot of time to try to develop why he is the way he is and why he cares about the things that he cares about. I think you can have a movie that has some really wackadoodle shit in it, and still have like a grounded character story at the core of it if you allow your characters to do that. I think this movie was, afraid to do those things and wanted to get to the whiz bang. And for me, that's a much inferior product.
I just thought of another positive about this movie that I wanted to share while it was in my brain so I don't look completely negative. Can I share it?
Mm-hmm.
Do it.
All right. In the trailer, it fucking bugged the shit out of me that everybody was calling it a symbiote. And I was glad to see in the movie itself, they now say symbiote.
It is those small things, right? Like,
it didn't save the movie.
Well, no, it didn't. But it is one of those things where, like, if you're going to use source material, at least get core things right. Like, I saw a thing when someone was talking about Van Helsing, the movie, earlier today, and one of their critiques was they repeatedly call Frankenstein's monster Frankenstein itself, which is kind of it's a common thing for people to make in the wild. But if you're making a movie about fucking Frankenstein and Frankenstein's monster, that seems like that's like check your basic research, like 101 stuff to knock out. It's not a huge thing, but it is one of those like little annoyances that take you out of the movie, and you think, come on, writers, you come on, film. This is a $100+ million thing. Someone should have at least gotten like the core facts right. And so, yeah, that's one of those things. Like whether they called it symbiote or whatever, it doesn't help or hurt the movie any, but it is one of those things. Like it is like one of like the core competencies if you're going to like adapt this material. So yeah, I'm with you, Brad. It was annoying in the trailer, and I'm glad they at least got that right.
Way to go.
Yeah.
Guys,
go
a minute and 14 seconds left until listeners on digital tape delay skip the Venom conversation for Stars Born. Any final thoughts?
Just wanted to mention real quick, the stinger is really fucking bad. Worst thing I've seen in a movie all year is Woody Harrelson in a stupid fucking Ronald McDonald wig setting up Carnage. It looked dumb, and I'm fucking angry that I'm going to probably have to see that in a feature film in the next couple of years.
You have to explain why that is so was much worse than some other stingers that I've seen where they introduce characters for movies coming up, sitting in a cell or in a impenetrable room, and they look menacing and they snicker and then cut to black.
Because I don't care about them setting up. I don't care about them setting up a movie or not. Like, that's a totally fine thing for a franchise type film. But the wig on Woody Harrelson looked stupid. Like, it was like taking out what it was. Like, that looked like someone went to Party City and just grabbed the first wig off the rack and said, "Fuck it, put it on him. We need to shoot this stinger." It looked bad. That's my problem with
makeup issues.
Yeah. Like, and I mean, hell, who am I to say? Like, Suicide Squad got an Oscar for makeup, so makeup fucking doesn't matter anymore. Anything goes. But yeah, this was awful.
So it was just the visual of it. It wasn't the setup or the character, the introduction or the dialogue. Just it looked bad.
Yeah, I mean, you can do whatever with those types of little stingers in terms of the setup, because that's all they are. It's movies nowadays for certain types of things are serialized, and a lot of serialized content, whether it be books, comic books, movies, even, are about like completing your story and setting up the next one. That's fine for me. But this was a bad setup. It made me want to watch the next thing even less because of how dumb it looked. Brad is sharing an image right now of Spider-Man fighting Ronald McDonald, and that is 1,000 times more interesting.
I had to turn to Brad at the stinger and say, who was that supposed to be?
Well, that's okay, because you don't have that depth of
why did I stick around? And again, why did I stick around for a fucking stinger that was totally lost on me?
Because I wanted to see it, and we were going to talk about it.
And I was sitting next to you. Yeah.
Yep. All right. Are we done with Venom?
Yes.
Please?
For good.
All right.
Fuck this movie.
We are officially done with our Venom discussion, so we're going to go ahead and switch gears and talk about A Star is Born. If you are tuning back into the show, maybe you skipped ahead using the time index if you listen on iTunes or Spotify, or if you put your headphones down for half an hour and came back, we're glad to have you back. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and talk about A Star is Born, starring Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga and Sam Elliott and a whole lot of other really awesome people. Spoiler free for probably the next 15-ish minutes. And then we'll give you plenty of warning before we go into spoiler territory. If you're on the fence about seeing this, we'll definitely give you our spoiler-free opinions on if you should see it in theaters, wait for rental, or skip it entirely, maybe, before we do open up those spoilers. Guys, are we ready?
Indeed.
Hey, yeah.
Then let's journey far from the shallow now into our discussion of... our discussion of A Star is Born. All right. So, Jim, I think you were pretty excited to see this one, and your perspective will be interesting to hear, given that you've seen, I think all of the iterations.
Well, that's
mostly. You 4 out of 5, I think you've seen, right?
Yeah. If you count one, that's not. Yeah. Right.
All right. So it'll be interesting to hear your thoughts on kind of how some of this compares. Maybe that's a spoiler discussion. We'll get there. But Jim, if you would kick this off for us, just give us the basic premise of the film, whether you think people should see it in theaters, wait for rental, or skip.
Yeah. So A Star is Born is, as Brad said, this is it's the fourth A Star is Born movie that all share the same title. But it's the first Star is Born movie from 1937 was based on a 1932 movie called What Price Hollywood. That's the one I did not see. But so I guess you could say there are kind of 5 movies in this set because the first one that wasn't called A Star is Born supposedly spawned them all. This one is about is directed by Bradley Cooper. I think his first big, major motion picture directorship was also Bradley Cooper also contributed to the screenplay with Eric Roth. Also stars Bradley Cooper, so he's got the triple play going here, starring, directed by, and written, screenplay by. Also stars Lady Gaga, as we know by now, Sam Elliott, Andrew Dice Clay is in this movie. Several performances that we'll talk about a little bit more that are notable. The movie is about a musician played by Bradley Cooper who helps a young singer played by Lady Gaga find fame. And I'm not going to give you the rest of the IMDb description, because it's spoilery. If you don't know this story, then I think it's kind of spoilery, because even the trailer didn't really spoil that much about the story. And I think a lot of people going in are a little bit surprised that kind of the turns that this story takes. It's not just a concert movie with Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga. It's much more than that. This is a story about a relationship of an up-and-coming singer and an established musician who's kind of a mentoring force in a way. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, I really loved this movie when I saw it. I thought, especially the first act to the first half of this movie, I think is damn near perfect. About probably the most exhilarating filmmaking and storytelling I've seen this year, with the mix of music, the writing, the character development, and the performances. Just kind of the perfect storm of everything. I think the movie falls victim to its own, to its own plot. Nothing to do with the performances or the writing. I just think, and I don't want to get too spoilery here, but in the second half of the movie, I think some of the fantasticness of that first half falls away. And what that means is, doesn't mean that it spoiled the movie for me. I still love the whole movie, even at 2 hours and 16 minutes. But I think the movie peaks a little bit too early and kind of glides down a path, if you will, toward the end, and it's not quite as captivating. Like I said, that first act really kind of grabbing me, throwing me in my seat, and didn't move. Felt like I didn't breathe. Might have cried a couple times. All in the first half of the movie. So yeah, Star is Born, definitely worth seeing. If you guys haven't seen it, I suggest you get out there and see this movie. This could be one of the best movies of the year, I think. Certainly one of the most talked about movies of the year. So even if you just want to be in the discussion, get out there and see the movie. It's pretty damn fantastic.
All right. Big praise from Jim. I guess I'll go next. So if I saw my worst movie of the year, which was Venom, which we talked about a little bit ago, and I saw my best movie of the year so far, I can't think of a more fitting movie in this discussion than A Star is Born, which is interesting for me because I actually got annoyed with the trailer for this movie. It was like in front of everything that we saw, like all spring, all summer. I'm like, good Lord, will this movie just come out already so that I don't have to see this trailer anymore? It was a great trailer. Will, I think you mentioned at one point on Facebook or something, the trailer was the best short movie of 2018.
That I did.
Yeah, and I see that. So going into this movie, I'm just like, all right, I'm kind of excited for this, but like that was weighing on me a little bit. Right from the get-go. It was amazing. There are some pacing issues with it. There's some characterization issues. It's not a perfect movie by any means, but I certainly enjoyed it a hell of a lot more than I thought I would. Man, Bradley Cooper, I would like do anything for that man. He was phenomenal acting in this film, but also did some really cool director stuff. We'll get into more of that, I'm sure, in spoilers as we talk it through. Lady Gaga, meat dress, take her for what you will. She's kind of divisive these days. Was fucking amazing in this. In fact, I have her singing in my ear right now. And I've been listening. I know, but I hear her. I've been listening to this soundtrack pretty much on repeat since I saw the movie 12 days ago or whenever it was. And I don't think I've done that with a soundtrack since probably Sing Street a few years ago. So this is a big win for me musically. Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga have some fucking amazing chemistry, which I wasn't sure they were going to have, but they totally did. Man, there's a lot I want to talk about, but I'm going to save it for spoilers. But this is a huge win for me. I would say go see it in theaters, not because you need a giant screen. I mean, you do want a great sound system, but just because it's being talked about so much right now, like, be part of the discussion. Go see this movie. Also, you know, it might hit you in the feels, and I'm addicted to being hit in the feels. I don't know if you are. So if that's you too, definitely go check it out. Will, how about you?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, the trailer for this movie, I never ended up getting tired of it, which is quite the accomplishment because I also saw this thing dozens upon dozens of times. But the trailer for this film is this tight, concise story that tells sort of the first act of this movie. And I fell in love with it. And the same with the movie. Like, this is a very competently, and I don't mean that as an insult, this is a very competently put together film from a direction, from a cinematography, and from a performance standpoint. Everything, all of the key elements that Bradley Cooper as director needed to bring together here came together quite well. The film looks gorgeous. It sounds gorgeous. The performances from him and from Lady Gaga are very, very compelling. I'm probably a little like Jim in that I think this movie doesn't quite fall into my favorite of the year lists because after a incredible, probably note perfect first half, I feel like it loses some of its steam in the second half. And I don't mean that it makes any like egregious missteps. There's nothing in the second half of the movie that's like, oh, this is bad, or I wish they had done this differently. But it didn't have all of the same charm and spark that the first half of the movie had for me. And some of it felt like it was sort of repeating a theme a little bit when I needed it to just kind of like move forward with its theme. That's more nitpicky stuff. This is a really, really great movie. Really, really solid. The soundtrack is really good, especially "Shallow." I mean, that's the song. Like that's the thing that's probably getting nominated for an Oscar. Like, be prepared to have Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga sing that on stage come spring. I liked a lot of this movie. There's a lot of the feels here, and the feels are very, they're very fitting with the formula of this type of movie. I think that's what's so neat about A Star Is Born is that the core story of this, the type, from all the different films, while it goes about things very differently, this is a very flexible story to the point where if someone were to tell me in 20 years they were making another remake of this movie based on whatever the cultural norms of the time where, I'd probably be down for it because I think this is the type of story that can work in just about any setting. I really like this movie. I think people are going to be blown away by the performances, and I think that if you're going to be anything like my theater, you're going to ugly cry through this movie, and that's okay. This is a good movie for that type of feel. Yeah, highly recommended from me.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk a little bit about it sounds like we all love the movie, but I wanted to talk about a couple of the performances from supporting cast members, specifically Sam Elliott, who is amazing. Yes. I thought he had some of the best scenes in the movie, the best non-singing scenes in the movie. As the stage manager, and well, I don't want to get too much, but I don't want to go into spoiler territory and give away character relationships. But Sam Elliott was great. I've loved him in anything. I'd love to see him get recognized for his work in this movie, and all the great work he's done. Andrew Dice Clay was a surprise.
Yeah.
But didn't we see him in? Was he in Blue Jasmine? I don't remember if he was in Blue Jasmine or not, but I thought we've seen him in something else where he kind of knocked our socks off a little bit.
It was Blue Jasmine, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the guy's good. I mean, I think he can play. I think he can play certain roles very well, and this was one of them for him. Really developed a kind of a rapport with that character as he jumped off the screen. But I just wanted to mention those two before they get overshadowed by what Bradley Cooper and Lady Gaga do.
And don't forget Dave Chappelle, who was also awesome in this. Loved seeing him turn up in this movie. I mean, we saw it in the trailer, but like obviously we get more of that in the movie, and I really dug that.
There's this thing that sometimes happens where good directors usually have the thing that they're known for, whether it is marrying story with their key cinematographer, or really hitting hard with sort of the dark and edgy stuff. There's a lot of different things that like certain directors are known for, and sometimes you get these directors who came up as actors first before transitioning over to direction. And a lot of times those directors, and Bradley Cooper here is going to be like an example proving my point. Their biggest strength is pulling the exact right performances out of his entire cast. I think that is the true strength of this movie above anything else. Cooper's performance itself is full of a lot of like gravel and gravitas, which is what it needs to be. Lady Gaga is allowed to do this performance that really blossoms through this film. Even the supporting cast, as you mentioned, I think that Sam Elliott he's one of those dudes who always classes up the joint. Andrew Dice Clay was next level in this. Anthony Ramos had a really small part in this, but I really liked whenever he was on screen. He was the one that played Ramon, the best friend.
Her friend,
yeah. This is a guy who, like, he's having a hell of a year too. Like, this is the dude who he came up through Hamilton. He's on that cast, which means he's going to be in The Heights with the next Lin-Manuel Miranda. He was in Monsters and Men, which is in theaters right now. He's one of the core cast of that. And he was in Patty Cakes, which, Jim, I know we've talked about a lot on this show.
Yep.
I loved seeing him on this. I even loved seeing two people who are essentially non-actors in Willem and Shangela. They're two drag queens who are pretty well known, primarily because they were both well represented on RuPaul's Drag Race. But they were the two primary drag queens that whenever you cut back, you usually saw them. And they only were on screen for a few minutes, but they provided you could tell exactly like what type of background and energy the Allie, Lady Gaga's character, came from. And I loved seeing them on screen because I loved what Cooper did with them. He utilized his cast perfectly. So yeah, all across the board, this cast is wonderful. And I think that a lot of that needs to go to Bradley Cooper for getting the right performances out of his team.
So Bill has a great question in the chat. He says, this was a perfect role for Gaga, but can she be a good actress when it doesn't involve music?
I think that remains to be seen. I did not see the season of American Horror Story that she was in. I know she's been in a few other things, but never like in a prominent role like this. She had her own documentary, I think, at one point that I did not see either. But yeah, I don't know. Well, maybe we'll get to see her in another role, another movie role. Maybe she'll, start to balance things out in her career. Primarily a singer, obviously, and songwriter. Very talented. She can act, obviously. I think if she gets the right role and the right, director here, I think we could see more great stuff from her, but we'll have to see. I hope it goes that way.
Yeah, and not to take anything away from her at all, I think that working with a director who has such an acting background and also what is her co-lead is probably beneficial for her, because I would imagine that if you come into this and you're Lady Gaga and you're used to the music side of things, and now you have to flex this other muscle that I think she has a natural predisposition towards. Like, you can't do this without being talented. But she had a great coach and a great co-lead to work off of her to help guide her through that. I think to answer Bill's question, I think, yes, I think that this is probably the perfect role for her. But I think I saw enough of her in the non-performance scenes, really holding her own, that I have hope that with the right script and with the right director, we could see something that doesn't have a shred of music in it and it still be incredibly solid.
She's going to be the new Meryl Streep. Just get ready.
She's the next Streep. And we see a lot of these musicians like this who start to have this kind of crossover appeal too. I mean, we've seen Janelle Monáe step out into film with Moonlight years ago. You even see some people who kind of come up more from hip hop side of things, like Common, who are probably just as well known for their non-musical roles as their actual musical background. So I don't know if that's her trajectory or not. I think she's also makes a ton of money being a musical act. So I don't know that she's in any rush to just do every single movie ever, but I mean, I'm on board. I'll see it.
I mean, I don't know if this is a great example because 47 Meters Down sucked, but Mandy Moore did the same thing, right? Came over from being a musician. Now she's a big star on This Is Us. And
absolutely. Yeah, she was in that really good and underrated movie 47 Meters Down from a few years back.
I do want to talk about an actor we have not yet discussed who is a sheer delight for me when he popped up in the film. And that's Greg Grunberg. I won't say anything about his role. It's minor, but I could tell just from like seeing his eyes and hearing his voice. It was like, oh my God, it's the telepath from Heroes / Snap Wexley from Star Wars.
Hey, Brett, do you have a cup of water nearby?
Well, I have a water bottle.
Okay, good, because you're a little thirsty.
Well, that is true. That is true.
This is the show for it, though, right? Like Greg Grunberg is one of those guys who he did Heroes. He was in the new Star Wars movies. I can't think what else he's really done. I think it's just those three things plus this. And he's one of those things. Whenever you see him, you're just like, oh, hey, Greg. I don't know if he's a good actor or not. Nothing against him. Like I don't think I've seen him do anything that was like super heavyweight or that like really blew me away. But for whatever reason, I always like seeing him on screen. I don't know. Yeah, I'll take a sip.
All right. Well, guys, are we ready for spoilers? Is it time?
Yeah.
All right. Spoilers for A Star Is Born are officially fair game. This is the part where I awkwardly ramble for a few moments to give you time to hit pause, step away, do whatever you got to do. Come on back in 15 minutes for some plugs. But here we go. Where do you want to start, guys?
There's a couple places we could start. We talked about how the movie, at least for Will and I, maybe lost a little steam in the second half. And I wanted to talk a little bit why I think that might have happened. First of all, it was super exhilarating to see the character. Help me out with her character name.
Allie?
Allie.
Yeah.
Come out of obscurity from performing in drag clubs and working the back room of a hotel, function hall, whatever. And come on to the stage with a song that she wrote with a famous musician. That whole section was like the peak of the movie. And that exhilaration soon turns to, she's peaking. She's off on her journey to become a star. And you can see on two fronts how the characters are, in my view, I mean, she's growing in popularity, but I didn't see the character as growing. The movie didn't depict it anyway as her growing very in terms of her. I don't know how to say it. Her just overall charisma, I guess. It's kind of weird. They showed her on billboards and filming music videos and this and that to kind of portray that she was famous and and had a lot of followers, but nothing matched what she did in those early scenes. And of course, his trajectory is kind of straight down as well. So you're dealing with kind of and maybe you could say he's dragging her down a little bit, because they're in a very close relationship. They obviously love each other. And I think his spiral is affecting her. And it's a very tough watch, the second half of the movie. Especially for me, which I knew where it was going, and I'm like, "Oh shit! Like this is not as fun." And doesn't mean it's not as well made. Just I don't know, just lost something.
Well, it's like an episode of ER, like birth and death in the same episode, right? Like life pays for life. But Jim, I wanted to ask you about your previous history with the other 1,000 versions of this movie. Did the previous incarnations maybe have like a lot more of that? Because I don't necessarily felt like it was missing for me necessarily. Comparing, contrasting, like, did they have more of it than this one did?
Say that again. You don't think what was like?
You had mentioned like second act, some of the stuff like falls away, falters in terms of like the rise of her star.
Yeah, it was almost like a montage for her, like certain touchstones. Like, okay, I'm going to be on a billboard. I'm going to do these pop songs. I'm going to go into the recording studio and record what somebody else wants me to record, not what really ignites my passion. It's almost like she didn't have the passion anymore. It seemed to me that was the case through the movie. I felt that she lost passion for the work. She was good at it, and she was popular and successful, but it wasn't as exhilarating as seeing her passion like in that first half of the movie. And so the other movies were kind of the same thing. I mean, all of them revolved around well, 3 of them revolved around the first 2 movies revolved around Hollywood, where both of the female leads were movie stars. Judy Garland was more of a singer than Janet Gaynor was in the first movie. And then, of course, we get into the Streisand one. She's not in Hollywood. It's more like this movie where you're talking about 2 musicians. You have the Chris Christopherson character, and the Barbara Streisand character, very similar to this movie. Although I think this movie is way better than that movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, they all focus on slightly different things, and a lot of the reason they focus on different things is because of the time periods when the films are made.
Yeah,
right. The first one, and I haven't seen What Price Hollywood either, so I can't speak to it. But the Gaynor film from 39. 37, 39, 37. Yeah, late 30s, is sort of in that golden age of Hollywood, sort of
big studios,
pre-World War II, kind of cutbacks, and so the film really leans heavily into that. Of course, Judy Garland's version has a lot more of a musical because around the time that film was being made, TV was a big force, and so people were watching more television at home, and so you had a lot of these like big musical extravaganzas in the theaters because that was the way of drawing people to the theaters, and that matched. And you had then Barbara Streisand's version in the which was around the same time as like the women's lib movement and things along those lines, and so you have a character there who probably is the most in control of her career of the different versions. And then this film here, what I think its strength and maybe even its weakness at the same time, because all of these are like kind of push and pull, right? This is the film that has the most character development for in this case, the Jackson Maines character. In some cases, he's Norman, but in this case, the Jackson character. A lot of times he's already just an established dude who is either in Hollywood or he's like especially the Hollywood ones. His background is essentially like, I'm a big guy in Hollywood, and I guess it's the stress and the fame that causes him to be an alcoholic or an addict or whatever it happens to be. And here you get this brother storyline, and you get this backstory with his father and this mental illness thing. And so you have so much of the back part of this movie that's devoted towards fleshing out this character, and it makes the most fully formed version of the male character in any of these movies, of any of them. This is a little bit at the expense of Allie or whoever the female lead is in any of these movies, because I feel like for me, she has agency all through this. It's not like she ever loses her agency or anything like that. But a lot of her career growth is happening slightly off screen because we're focusing more on the Bradley Cooper character. So there were moments where she was on this meteoric rise, that felt just kind of like a little rushed and a little like off to the side for me, because
a little out of her control.
Like we didn't get to see her reacting as much to that, because we were seeing primarily those things happening, plus her reacting to the Bradley Cooper like downward spiral stuff. And again, that's the story of the movie, so I can't nitpick it too much. But it is that slight tipping of the balance from one character to the other that I felt like lost a little bit, just a smidge of the momentum in the second half. Again, I love this movie, but that's probably, if I were to try to codify like what it is that lost it for me, I think I'd probably lean there.
Yeah. And there was actually some, and I don't want to get too deep into this because it's not, but there was actually some controversy about this movie, about, oh, here we go again, another, female who's lost her agency because she's, she's overshadowed by this, toxic masculinity and you've got it's a broken man story that's overshadowing her.
Don't forget, she became popular because a man exposed her.
Yeah. But that's integral to the movie. Now, if Cooper and whoever wrote this wanted to rewrite this and put a different twist on it, I suppose they could have, but they chose not to. But I still saw her as having a ton of agency in this movie in terms of what she did. She wrote her own songs, at least to a point, and that's when I didn't like it, is when that slimy fucking music manager kind of got a hold of her, and I'm like, oh God, I wish they would have her be able to see through what he's doing before we get to the very end of the movie, because he was obviously a destructive force in her life and her relationship, and the movie didn't portray her as seeing any of that.
Yeah, I wanted to dispel the notion of this is a character without agency, because this character takes her, and I think we're on the same page. And that's something that I do look for in movies, making sure that all the characters do have agency all the way through. But she does. She absolutely does. She is in control of all of her decisions. Just because someone has agency doesn't mean they always make the right decisions. And in a couple places, she makes decisions that are basically extending an olive branch to someone who you probably should have cut out of your life. That's a thing that a character with agency can do. Just because they have agency doesn't mean they only make exemplary decisions. This is a character who was in control of everything. So yeah, again, my issue with it had nothing to do with whether or not she had agency or not. More just that I think a little more of the narrative attention was paid to his story than to hers. So I didn't get to see her responding to her own success as much as I would have liked.
Yeah. So like a balance issue, you think the movie was tilted? I don't know if I could agree with that. I think the movie was pretty balanced in terms of, he did fade into the background. We knew his problems. I did like the wrinkle they threw in with the brother, the Sam Elliott stuff. That was great. I thought it was funny how the movie was, and Cooper was self-aware enough to put it in the movie that he was actually stealing his brother's voice. And by that, he literally meant stealing his voice, because he was doing a pretty damn good imitation of Sam Elliott throughout this movie, like with that low gravelly voice. And I really think he meant to put that line in there. It was a very serious moment, but I kind of got an inside chuckle, like, oh my God, he actually did steal Sam Elliott's voice for the character of Jackson Maines.
Yeah, it was pretty eerie, like how similar they sound. And it was interesting because, like, going into the movie, they played this, like, I don't know, 4-minute pre-movie thing, and it's like on the red carpet or whatever, and they're talking to Sam Elliott, and they're like, well, what do you think about this movie, Sam Elliott? He's like, well, it's a little eerie hearing your voice come from somebody else. And I'm like, what? his voice coming from somebody else. Like, is Bradley Cooper like playing like Sam Elliott, like young, and it's like a flashback or something? Like, how is this gonna work? And then figured out what really happened, and that was kind of interesting. And like that part where Bradley Cooper tells him like wasn't his dad he was idolizing. The reason he stole his voice is because he idolized him. That was like fucking
ripped your heart out
to the feels. It totally did.
Yeah.
I bawled so hard. I'm missing up thinking about it now. I don't know why. Maybe I can unpack that someday with a qualified psychologist, but that just really, really hit me in the feels. And God, Sam Elliott, that man can fucking act.
And I think that's a fair, like, in hearing people talking about this movie, like the thing that I keep hearing in terms of like, oh, the scene that got me was that scene, you know? And I think that scene is really strong because I think that it's hard to relate to what it's like to have a meteoric rise to success or a meteoric fall. It's hard to necessarily relate to those elements as well as it is to relate to, I had an older sibling who had to be a quote unquote father figure for me because my own father figure wasn't there. That is a super relatable thing for, unfortunately, way too many people. So yeah, I mean, I think, Brad, you're not alone in that. Like, that is a sledgehammer to the feels, just like just making every room dusty whenever you think about it.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to talk about, this is sort of adjacent to the movie, kind of. So after I saw the movie, I put up a notice that the soundtrack was available on iTunes and Spotify or whatever. But I put the caveat, like, make sure you see the movie before you listen to the soundtrack first.
Yes.
It gives things away. And I had all these people like complaining, oh, I listened to the soundtrack and it like gave away that he fucking dies. Thanks. And it made me a little curious as to why you think they included like dialogue snippets in the soundtrack of this movie, because the songs, on their own, I don't know that they're that much of a spoiler, except for maybe the one she sings at the end. But the dialogue, I mean, makes it pretty clear what fucking happens.
I've been a little turned off from the soundtrack slightly because of those dialogue snippets, and it's not because I don't like those dialogue snippets. They're good in the movie, but soundtracks that have those built into songs are usually turnoffs for me, unless it's like a musical where the dialogue scenes in between are like actually part of it, like the Rent original soundtrack or something like that. But when I'm listening to the soundtrack of this, honestly, I'm like skipping past the little like let's have dialogue for a couple seconds just so I can go to the next song or go to the next part. So yeah,
maybe they felt they needed more. They needed to pad out the soundtrack a little bit because there weren't enough sha la 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 lows, in the rest of the song. In the rest of the songs, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how many times you can do sha la 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 la.
I can tell you how many times.
Look, she's already done the rah 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 rahs, so like they had to have something, Jim. You got to give him something.
Can I tell you my favorite part of this movie? And it was, I don't know if it was intentional or unintentional or meta or not, but so this movie comes out, this movie is in trailers, right? And so this movie gets a lot of notoriety during the marketing campaign because, and this I heard people say like, oh, is that the movie where like Lady Gaga goes, oh, like that's what it was known for. It was the Lady Gaga saying, oh, really loud.
The Gaga whale.
There is a point in this movie, which the movie was shot before the trailer was released, mind you. So before all of this like critical buzz, there is a moment in the movie where she's visiting him in rehab, and she's definitely like, she's now a pop icon. This is post her winning her Grammy, and she's wearing this jacket that just says the word OH on it over and over and over again. And I felt that was the most meta thing ever because that is the thing that the movie was most known for. But it was known for that after that scene was shot. So it's dumb and it's weird. But like when I saw that scene, I was like sitting up going like, are you guys seeing this? Are you seeing her coat? Are you seeing her coat? It is the best coat possible. I want that. What I'm saying is if anyone wants to buy me a coat that just says O on it repeatedly for Christmas, like I'll just hook me up. Like I will wear that shit.
Will's going to put it on his Movie Bears podcast Amazon wish list.
Are we going to be that show that does that?
No, we will never be the show that does that. Oh my God.
That's always just so like, look, listeners, I don't send me anything, but I do have an Amazon wish list. Oh, look what I got today.
Oh my gosh.
I'll never be that guy. But if I am, just message me later. We'll find that coat. No.
Oh,
another scene popped into my head that kind of floored me, in not in a like an emotional like make me cry kind of way or make me sad, but the back and forth they had in the bathroom. I think she was in the tub or something, or he was in the tub, and they were.
Oh, like, when we saw her boobies.
Well,
when we saw Lady Gaga's.
Well, that's not why. But
Lady
like,
Tata.
They had a back and forth about. I forget exactly what was said, but it was very intense dialogue between the two, almost like really hurtful stuff that they said to each other.
He told her she was ugly after she was all like, my nose is so bad, I'll never get a job.
Right.
Yeah.
And she said something to him too that I forget was also something about his drinking or whatever, like really cut to the core.
Mm-hmm.
That was a really good scene in terms of the performances from the two. And I'm like, whoa, like, where did that come from? Like from Lady Gaga, like, how does she summon that? Like this, somebody we know from the singing world, like she, just impressed me, I guess, with her ability in that scene to like really to deliver a line and punch you in the face with it.
When you have worn a meat dress for that many hours, you learn how to do things.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Bill is asking if the killer version of Pretty Woman that they did in the movie was on the soundtrack. That's the one where he just before he falls down drunk on stage. Is that the one? They were at some. It was a Roy Orbison tribute show. And he was. It was actually a pretty good version of the song, even though he was high as fuck.
All right. Well, guys, it is getting toward time to wrap things up here. This question came up. Is Lady Gaga a lock for Best Actress this year? There was some discussion happening in the chat room about this. I don't know that she's a lock, but I'll tell you what, I definitely better see a nom for her, because if there isn't one, I think that's a travesty.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard because when you have to really narrow it down to, is this one of the 5 best female lead performances of the year? And I automatically start thinking like, well, Toni Collette was this year. We had the leads from The Favorite. We've still got a bunch of movies that are coming out in the last 2 months of this year that are going to have some like powerhouse performances in them. So it's hard to say like specifically if this one is one of the top 5 performances of the year or not. It is a damn good performance. I think that it is a strong contender for nomination. And I would be more surprised if it wasn't nominated than if it was. I think we're going to see Gaga with the nomination.
Yeah, I'd agree. And hopefully Sam Elliott too, for this and his body of work. He might be a dark horse for best supporting.
Yeah, I could see that.
Well, if he doesn't win it this year, maybe it's time to let the old ways die.
Oh, it's time to remake The Lifeguard is what it is.
Oh, goodness.
I love that your Sam Elliott and your Vin Diesel are adjacent, Brad.
All right.
That's good. I'd like to hear you say, oh, let the old ways die.
All right, family. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die.
Yeah, it's good. I like it.
There you go. There you go. All right.
That's the Fast and Furious movie I need to see.
I would actually watch that movie. That would be phenomenal.
Yep.
That would be great. All right. We need to do some plugs and then wrap this mofo up. So I'm going to go ahead and transition us over to some plugs. Mine is actually for a movie that came out in 2010. We were riding the old airplane from Hawaii back to the mainland, and I actually found this movie. Guys, don't shit your pants, but it's a documentary. Brad's recommending a documentary.
Too late.
Oh, I hope you wore the brown pants today, Will, because yeah. So I'm very excited for the new Halloween movie that's coming out, and the American flight we were on had like the built-in TVs, you know, in the chair in front of you, and I'm just flipping through stuff looking for something to watch, and there it was. Halloween, the Inside Story, a documentary that came out. I think it was made for TV, or at least it felt like it back in 2010. It's actually available for free on YouTube to watch right now. Again, Halloween, the Inside Story. But unlike some of the other Halloween documentaries I've seen, this had a lot of like really cool, like behind the scenes, just like trivia and snippets. And like one that I'll give away, Jim and I watched the movie tonight, actually, the actual Halloween, not the documentary. All those scenes that we were talking about a few weeks ago when we were talking about our favorite fall movies and how they did such a good job with fall in this movie. Apparently they had 3 bags of plastic leaves, and they would sprinkle them all over, film the scene, and then all of the cast and crew had to pick the fucking leaves up, put them back in the bags, walk to the next location, spread them out. It was crazy. And this movie is full of all kinds of fun stuff like that. But I will say, watch it at
like
your own
palm
peril.
trees in New Jersey.
Yeah, like suddenly seeing palm trees in fucking, you know, Haddingfield, whatever, New Jersey. There's some other things too, like, you know, how many people played Michael Myers, you know, in the Halloween movie, and, you know, why is one of them 5 feet tall and one is 8 feet tall? Like, there's some really, really cool stuff in here. So check it out. It's on YouTube. It's fun to see. The only thing is, watching Halloween tonight, I couldn't like unknow things that I found out in the documentary, and that kind of like distracted me a little bit from the movie. So watch it with a grain of salt, I guess. But it's on YouTube. Halloween: The Inside Story.
That's
Jim?
a good one. That's a good one. I haven't got around to the documentary yet, but probably on my list to get to. Maybe before we review Halloween on the next show.
There you go. Sounds good. We definitely will be talking about the new movie next time. So go see it this weekend. Jim, what's your plug this week?
My plug is a movie that, Will, I'm pretty sure you saw this at Fantastic Fest. I did not see it there because I wasn't there. But it did come out on Netflix last week, called Apostle. And this movie is, it takes place around the turn of the century, 1900 something. Oh God, I'm forgetting his name already. Dan Stevens plays this drifter who's sent on a mission by his father to rescue his kidnapped sister, who's been she's been taken by a religious cult far away on some island in the middle of nowhere, and weird fucking shit starts to happen. Really dark, violent, scary, like what the fuck kind of stuff is happening. Really good movie, some really good performances. I think Dan Stevens is good. A little over the top sometimes with his performances, but I really dug the vibe of this movie and kind of the production design. Kind of takes you into this world. Yeah, kind of like picture like the same world that The Witch was filmed in, except now we have a whole like cult of dark, evil, worshiping, you know, society, I guess. See it now. It's on Netflix. It's called Apostle.
Yeah, and Michael Sheen's so good in that too.
Does he play the main? Does he play the main
he
guy?
is, the one who I'm trying to describe the three different guys.
He's not the leader, right?
He's the one. We'll talk offline because I was about to give a description of which one he is, but even that is spoilery. So all the different ones of like differentiating which of the three guys feel spoilery. So
okay, all right. But yeah, I think I know which one you're talking about.
He was the one that had the most depth.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yep. Fantastic performance by him. Yeah.
Nice. All right. Will, how about you? What's your plug?
Yeah, it's hard because like the first two things I was thinking like I should plug Halloween. No, we're going to review that next week, so I'll save my thoughts on it. I could plug First Man, but I think there's a chance we might be talking about that one too. So I'm going to plug something that's a little further out. I mentioned it a little bit in chat, but I had a chance to see the new Yorgos Lanthimos movie, The Favorite. Yorgos is the dude that did Killing of the Sacred Deer, and he did Dogtooth, and he did The Lobster, and he did The Alps. He's done some great movies, and The Favorite is a sort of an 18th century English period piece where it stars Olivia Colman. She's playing Queen Anne, and her health is just fading, and she's on the throne, and she's got this close friend and confidant, this lady played by Rachel Weisz. And all of a sudden in comes to the picture a new servant who used to have royal ties, or used to have positional ties and now doesn't, played by Emma Stone. And there becomes this power struggle between the Emma Stone character and the Rachel Weisz character for who can become sort of Queen Anne's favorite. And this movie, so I'm not prone to period pieces as a whole. Like a lot of times when I think of period pieces, I think like, well, this is going to be dull. Like maybe there'll be some good acting, but it'll be stiff and it'll, whatever. I think The Favorite is without a doubt the funniest movie that I've seen all year. The sort of the courtly backstabbing that happens, the performances, the absurdity that the movie lets itself go towards. Like I was laughing my fucking ass off in the theater. I love this movie. It is in my top 5 right now. It is in my top 1 in terms of laughs and in terms of comedies. And it might even be Yorgos's most accessible of his films too, despite it being a period piece. So it's called The Favorite. It comes out November 23rd, and it is so freaking good.
Be looking for that one for sure. Is it going to get probably a limited release, then a wide release or something?
So
period pieces, I don't know how they're going to market that thing.
It's hard because I think Yorgos is exactly on that place where when a movie of his comes out, it gets he's in that place where he doesn't get like 4,000 theater like massive releases, but he gets like wide limited, if that makes sense. Yeah. Like it's not going to be playing in like 10 theaters nationwide. Like if you have an art house theater within sneezing distance of you, it's going to be occupying 1 or 2 of the screens there. Yeah, it'll be available for a lot of people.
Very cool.
All right. Awesome. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week. Next week, we're going to be reviewing the new sequel, prequel, ? I don't even know what you call it. Halloween. We'll just call it Halloween. Starring Jamie Lee Curtis. So go see it this weekend. We'll be talking about it next week. I don't know if we'll be able to squeeze First Man in or not. We'll talk about that. Maybe we can, Jim. It's kind of a packed weekend already, but we'll see what we can maybe do. But definitely, big thank you to everyone who tuned in this week. Thanks for your patience with the great YouTube outage of 2018, of course, necessitating that we record on Thursday night instead of our normal Tuesday night. We'll be back next week for our normal time slot. So Tuesday at 6:40 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Definitely catch us then. Thanks so much to everyone who was with us in the live chat tonight. Bill and JP and Jordan and everybody else. Thanks so much for being with us. If you listened on digital tape delay through the magic of iTunes or Spotify, we love you guys too, even though you're hearing this a few days, months, maybe even years from now. Don't forget that we love you as well. Good night, everybody. We'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.